welcome back to episode 229 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? Well, tonight, no guests and no Gary, actually, funnily enough, but there is myself and Dave. And we're going to be talking about something called the Mandela effect, which is basically another phrase for false memory. But we'll get to that. And before we get to that, we'll get to a man. It's not so much false memory, but no memory whatsoever. So this should be interesting. How are we doing?
Thanks for that introduction, Adam. I'm good, thank you. Yes, I'm not particularly well known for having a great memory, although I like to say I just remember the things that need to be remembered. I did do a bit of revision briefly on the drive home. I listened to a podcast on this subject twice. So I reckon with that kind of prep, I'm going to nail it.
Indeed, indeed. What could possibly go wrong? So, yeah, the Mandela effect. We're sort of going to talk about tonight. Who knows where it's going to go, as we always say. So we might get a little bit distracted along the way, as is so often the case. But we are going to try and stick to the facts. So I'll be dead honest. It's something I hadn't heard about till a couple of months ago when a guy at work called Simon had mentioned it to me and said, you know what, you should do a podcast. And I kept saying, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. But we didn't have a guest plan for tonight. So I thought, what can we talk about? I thought, why not do something about the Mandela effect? First of all, David, let's test that knowledge of yours. Do you know why it's called the Mandela effect?
Okay, so I'm just going to caveat with my entire knowledge of this subject is from this podcast I listened to. So anybody that thinks I'm wrong, that's my reason. But the guy on the podcast was a cognitive psychiatrist. So I'm going to assume that he was right. So, okay, according to what he said, there was a lady called Fiona Broome who once proclaimed that she thought that Nelson Mandela had died in the 1980s, and it was pointing out to her that she was wrong, and she was adamant that he had, and that she remembers it, she remembers the event, she remembers the news stories, and she was absolutely convinced it was. And then people said, no, you're wrong, and she thought, wow, this is amazing, and went off and registered the domain name themandelaeffect.com, and that's where the term came from.
That is, as far as I understand it, 100% accurate. Yeah, I find it, first of all, it's a very interesting concept. It's an interesting idea and an interesting name for something that is basically, like I said, false memory, where you have an idea, you have a memory of something that happened that didn't actually happen. But I find it a very unusual name because it's very personal to that one lady, although there are apparently a number of other people who have believed that. But I do remember Nelson Mandela's passing. I do remember him being in prison, but at no point did I think that he died in the 1980s. I remember him dying in around about 2013, I think it was. Might be a year either way, I'm not sure.
It was 2013, yeah. And this is just when we got to 3 minutes, and Albert and Adam said, I'm 100% right. I can't remember his name. At that point, we should have ended the podcast at that point.
Yeah, just call it a day.
But she was into the spirits and dead. What's that word called? You've had those on the podcast.
Yeah, we're like a necromancer or a medium.
Yeah, one of those two. Mix of those things. Into spirits and ghosts and things like that. And I think because of that, academics and people don't quote her anymore, because plus she actually came out and said it's nothing to do with false memories, which kind of defeats the whole point of what she thought what she claimed it was, and what was built up around the label she gave it. She actually says that's not what she meant, and that's not what it is.
That's interesting. See, I was unaware of that. So I'm learning stuff now, and it was my stupid idea to do a podcast about it. So yeah, that in itself is quite peculiar. And fully enough, when we had John Frisso on, who was the New York City cop who dealt with missing persons, and it does go back to that medium sort of thing. So we spoke to him about mediums on that episode. And one of the things he said was, so sometimes they'll give you information that it's difficult, you want to investigate it, but at the same time, you don't want to put on a report where you got that information from. Because if you turn up at some person's house and say, I want to dig up your floor based on this wacko who's wackadoo, who's just phoned up the police station at 10 o'clock at night and says she believes in ghosts, or she's been speaking to the dead spirit of Nelson Mandela, and he's given us some indication that there's a body buried here. you know what I mean? It sort of muddies the water. People aren't going to take you seriously, are they? And I think that's a little bit of it.
I think that's true, but also I think she went on then to basically fuel the idea that it was a conspiracy theory and he really did die in the 1980s. So she kind of started this thing which got a little bit of momentum, and then she completely went off at a different tangent, but it actually carried on and lived on beyond her. Well, no, I don't know if she's dead, but lived on beyond that initial idea.
Well, let's, and I don't mean her ill when I say this. Let's hope it does live on beyond her, and it's something that we continue to talk about beyond that, rather than the fact that we hope she's dead, because that isn't the case.
And of course, the Mandela effect is a lot more, sounds a lot more interesting than just a false memory, doesn't it? Which is a bit boring, really.
Yeah, it is. Do you know how it works then? Do you know? Well, should we have a look at a few first? Okay.
Go for it.
You're a fan of Queen, aren't you, Dave?
The Queen or the band?
Well, I'll let you answer either.
The band, yeah, definitely. And I like Queen. God rest her soul.
Yeah. I'm not okay. We're in danger of speaking ill of the dead again. If indeed the woman who came up with this is dead, we don't know that she is. So yeah. So the song "We Are the Champions." Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
How does that finish? Give me the last line of that song. Give me the last few words of that song, if you will.
I don't know. You know, I'm terrible at. I can't remember song lyrics to songs I've listened to thousands of times.
You've listened to Queen for 40 years. You must remember. We are the champions.
I remember the first line.
Yeah. How does it finish?
I can't remember. I can't remember. I don't remember.
People remember it finishing. Okay. Of the world, like that.
Okay.
Press the wrong button. Actually, that should have been. I actually meant to hit a button which puts tone into your voice, so it's not entirely toneless like that was. And I pressed the wrong button, so it sounded like I was singing in a church. so yeah. So people remember it's finishing of the world. Is that how it finishes?
Well, if I knew how it finished, I'd have answered your previous question.
Exactly. It doesn't finish like that. The studio album, every version of it that you can purchase, except for one, which is the one that he sang at Live Aid, Freddie sang of the world at the end of it like that. But that's how people remember it, that song finishes. And they'll stick it on Spotify. Thankfully, we didn't have too many people tuning in and listening to me singing there. And ones that we did was probably tuning it out round about now. But people remember it for that being the final word.
Okay, so you thought you'd test that theory live on the podcast by asking me, somebody who's notoriously terrible at remembering things, to prove your point. That didn't really work out, did it?
No, and I fear a lot of these might just go south as well with your appalling memory.
I'll take your word for it, though, and I think that actually from this other podcast, that was probably thought far more authoritative than authoritative. Is that a word? Has far more authority than me and you on the subject. He did say that it's a bit of a myth that the Mandela thing, I can't remember what it's called now. The Mandela effect is to do with groups and large groups of people understanding. And he actually said that's not actually what it is.
No. Yeah, so ultimately it's about your memory. It's called conflagration. Did they mention that at all?
No, not that I remember.
No, not that you remember. No, another wasted question.
No, they didn't. I've listened to it twice in the last hour and a half. They didn't say conflagration.
What it is then? That is a name for it. The amount I put it, but ultimately the way your mind works, and this is largely. I'm going to say this might be our first left turn. I apologize for this. The idea of religion is believed to stem from this as well. It's about your mind filling in the blanks. So you remember things a certain way. It isn't necessarily that way, but your mind fills in the blanks, and ultimately you start believing that. And this is the idea behind religion. Okay, so the mind starts to correlate and understand things However, there are gaps in that because we can't understand everything. The human mind isn't capable of contemplation at that level and understanding everything on this planet and understanding how everything works. There's huge gaps in that. With science, I accept, and the likes of Brian Cox, that we are learning and we're filling in those gaps. But years and years and years ago, so maybe 2,000 years ago, even beyond, because there's religions previous to Christianity, we needed to fill in the gap. So we had an idea of how things worked, but it didn't quite make sense. So all of a sudden, something would happen that we couldn't explain, and we needed a gap. We needed something to make that leap of faith, if you will. So ultimately, that was the idea. When we couldn't explain something, that was an act of God. That was some greater power that we then needed to understand what that greater power was, and we needed to put a name to it. And that's where religion supposedly comes from. If you are religious, I apologize. I am not saying this to offend you. This is just one theory. The other one is that God is, of course, real and he did create us and everything's tickety-boo. If you want to believe that, that's fine. However, if you want to believe in conflagration, that is also fine. We will not judge you. But that is, so that is the idea behind it. Can you understand that idea that if you can't explain something, you need an explanation, that religion then might plug that gap, that it is a greater power that did it? Okay, I'm fine with that. That's how that happened.
Yeah, they referred to it, I think, as meta memories. And they basically described it as there's no way, as amazing as the brain is, there's no way you can remember absolutely everything. So it uses your knowledge and your experiences and all of those sensory things that's got into your head that creates this meta memories, which is the background information. And then when it tries to piece a memory together, when those neurons are firing around trying to align with each other, it fills the gap with that knowledge that it takes from elsewhere. So yeah, it's I don't think they use conflagration. I'm sure they called it meta memories, which absolutely makes sense because you can't remember everything. And you know that even if you were down the pub with your mates just telling a story, a funny story about something that happened at the weekend or whatever, you even know when you're telling it that actually you're probably filling in the gaps because you can't remember everything, but you're just telling the story and you go, and the gist of it is right and the sense of it is right and the facts may be right, but actually the finite detail is mostly probably made up.
That's it. If you ever listen to, it's easy to do this because Gaz is near. If you ever listen to one of his stories, they change on a daily basis. You know what I mean? When he forgets what's gone on and adds in extra factors that make no sense whatsoever about the existence of God and what he's done and how he became him. I apologize, Gaz, if you ever listen back to this, mate. I can't help myself. So yeah, but you're right. So it is not a mass effect. However, there is a degree where, because minds would like to think we operate differently and that we all have our own individuality to it, the mind will work in a certain way that, generally speaking, it will be filled, the gap will be plugged in a very, very similar way. So certain films fall well within that. So Star Wars, you're a Star Wars fan, yeah?
Yeah, I like Star Wars.
Yeah, you remember the bit where Luke gets his hand cut off in Empire?
I did. And just as a slight segue, they talked about films and TV and things like that, and the way you remember them is because they're sort of visual and fictional, and they have stories to them. You kind of remember them, and you're constantly kind of reinforcing them. You're remembering them far easier than other things, and for me, that would be true. I can remember his hand being cut off, even though I can't remember the last line of the song I've listened to thousands of times.
So yeah, you remember his hand getting cut off, and you remember that famous line when Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, as we later find out that he is, Darth Vader tells Luke that he is indeed his father. Do you remember that line?
I do. And now if I say it, you're obviously going to tell me that's not what it was, but it went something like, Luke, I am your father.
Yes, that is exactly it. Except he did not say that.
No, I didn't think so.
He said, "No, I am your father." You're like, because Luke accuses him of killing his father, and he says, "No, I am your father." And everybody gasps in shock and horror. And on the first time around, second time less shocking. But yeah, that is indeed that sort of thing, and everybody remembers it. But the thing is, it's been parodied so many times, and in every parody version of it, the version that gets retorted is Luke I am your father, and that's largely why people remember it. They remember it from somewhere else, not from there. Yes, you could have said, when you say how many times you've seen that film, how many times you listen to that song, I've seen that film, I don't know, maybe easily double figures. Absolutely love that. Watched it virtually every week growing up. And the other one, here's another one, Silence of the Lambs. You a fan of that?
I have seen it, but not for a long, long time.
So yeah, Anthony Hopkins plays Hannibal Lecter, plays a fantastic role. And the one bit that gets quoted from this, the line from that film you hear the most is, "Hello, Clarice." Yeah, when she first walks in and he meets her and he stood there at the prison and you see this creepy guy with his hands cupped behind his back and he goes, "Hello, Clarice." Never, ever says that throughout the film. He wishes her a good morning.
But I suppose in both of those cases that clearly, I remember that famous line when Anthony Hopkins said "Good morning."
Exactly.
It's not going to fly. And with the Star Wars one, "No, I'm your father." There's no context. It doesn't work.
Very true. Very true. But here's the thing as well. So, do you know which film that actually does come from? The Hello, Clarice.
What's the one where the guy puts a knife through a door? Here's Johnny. That one.
Yeah, that one. No, he definitely just said, "Here's Johnny." It's an axe, and it was made some years before.
Wow, details.
Yeah. Details indeed, minor details. No, it's from The Cable Guy, starring Jim Carrey.
All right, that is the guy that Cable has in telephone in America.
As in TV. Close.
I'll just get my coat at this point.
But no, again, so that's another one that is misleading. I'll give you one final one from films, okay? There's a very, very famous line, and we're going back to a film starring, I believe, Humphrey Bogart. Play it again, Sam.
All right, okay. Is that the line that you didn't actually say?
Yeah, never said it. Never said it. But again, that comes from somewhere else. So Woody Allen made a film about a guy who's obsessed with the film Casablanca, and that film is called
Play It Again, Sam.
Play It Again, Sam. Yeah. So you can see how the mind gets twisted and it starts remembering. Because again, like whatever he says in there, like I think I think it might even be the female character in it who says Ingrid Bergman, who says "Play it once, Sam" or something like that. Probably not in quite a deeper voice as I just did it in, but who knows? But yeah, so she says that in the film, but you remember it again. But you're quite right though. Play it once, Sam. What's that mean? That's got no context to it at all. There's nothing cool about that, is there?
No, you got to say play it again because you need to know why he wants to play it again. It creates that intrigue, creates the question that needs an answer.
Yeah, but don't you find it fascinating that in terms of you believe you're in control of your own mind, you believe you can. Well, you don't. You can dip in and pull out some information when you require it. There's things that you've experienced yourself that they should be as you remember them. So I didn't have this noted down, but this is what makes me think then. So what I love to do. So sometimes before I go to work and before the kids go to school, Matilda will say to me, "Do you want to jump in a hot tub, Daddy?" And I'll miss my breakfast. I'll grab some breakfast at work because she likes to sit and she likes for me to tell stories about stuff like me and Kim before she was born. She likes to hear all those stories, and I recant them. And I'd like to think I recant them the same every time, and I've been recanting them the same for years. Well, here's the thing: how can we trust that the stuff that we remember, though you think back to your wedding day, you'll remember, you probably won't, but you remember it in a certain way. How can you trust that those memories are real when we just discovered that actually it's the stuff that people should remember as seen and have listened to or seen in a film hundreds of times isn't the way they remember it? How can you trust that what you remember experienced once is how it happened?
I'd watch the video.
Fair enough. Wedding was a bad example. You know what I'm saying.
But did you in the course of your research read about the flashbulb memories?
I did not.
Okay, I'll tell you about the flashbulb memories then, which is very similar to what you're saying. So the flashbulb memories is this theory way back. I can't remember the details, but basically big events like where were you when John F. K was shot? And everyone can tell you where they were, what they were doing, who they were with, or when we landed on the moon, or more recently, when the Twin Towers got struck. Everyone, almost everyone could say, I was here, I was with this person, this is what I was doing. And the theory goes that those flashbulb moments can be remembered much better over time because there's something that goes on in your brain, and it was something to do with adrenaline and all those sort of chemical reactions. It was so significant that the memories get more deep seated, and that was believed for quite a while. And then they started to do tests on it, proper experiments to see if it was actually true. And they took the Twin Towers as an example, and they asked people how they could remember it and the events, and then they measured over a period of time, after a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, how they recanted the same thing and saw or observed how much it deviated from their original fresh memories. And then they compared that with people from Germany, and they asked those how they remembered the same events at the same time periods. And when they looked back at it, what they found was that the two sets of memories sort of decayed or got less accurate to pretty much the same degree. The actual remembering of the original incident from their sort of very early recanting was just as sort of inaccurate or accurate. There was no striking difference. But what was different is that the people in America believed and had more confidence in their current memory being correct than the people in Germany. So the sort of theory goes that it's actually the quality of the memory, the accuracy of the memory is no different, but the belief that the memory is correct is so much stronger when it's something that's quite personal to you. So like a wedding, like when a disaster happens in your own country and things like that. And it was just really interesting because they thought it was more accurate because they were more convinced, and it wasn't. It's just that they really believed it was more accurate.
Well, that's interesting. But I mean, it still sort of begs the question there. So again, if you might believe, then you might be, because you were at your wedding, I'm assuming. Yeah, were you at your wedding? Do you remember that much?
I remember my wedding quite well, actually.
Oh, fair play. So in terms of your wedding, you would believe that you remember it quite well. However, if that doesn't say that you do remember it well, you know what I mean? There are other people there who will have memories of it, which you would say are maybe less accurate because it's less personal to them. They might have enjoyed being there. They might be found, friends and relatives might have loved spending the day there. But your memory would be much more personal. So you will believe more strongly that your memory is correct and theirs isn't. Although in your case, I think you'd probably say, I've got good reason to have doubts given my memory is as appalling as it is.
I would probably defend myself less to that argument. But yes, the basic principle would be that my memories of the day could be, in terms of accuracy, could be just the same as my cousin Bob. But I would believe, if someone challenged me on how certain I was, I would be more convinced that my memories are right than my cousin Bob's. He'd probably just go, yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, I'm not really sure now. Whereas I'd be, no, it absolutely happened. And it's because it was personal to me. But actually, the accuracy would be no different.
I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating that also that just the idea that your memory, and when you talk about memory, most of the time, if you hear the word memory, you think about something like a computer. Yeah, it stores it. You save a computer document. To the best of our knowledge, when you bring it back up, it's exactly the same as it was when you close it down. That memory is, for want of a better word, perfect. Okay. Anybody who's ever lost a hard drive will tell me that definitely isn't the case. But you know what I'm saying. It is what you save down is pulled straight back up again, and that is our idea of memory because of technology. But in real terms, biologically speaking, that absolutely isn't the case. And you know this anyway because when you think, so say for example, Twin Towers is probably a bad example because I'd like to think everybody's emotions were roughly the same on that day. The idea of absolute shock and despair. But if we were to say, and this is one of the things that police say, that in terms of eyewitnesses actually aren't wholly reliable because you aren't taking it in. So I remember Stephen Fry did this thing. So he was given a lecture and he gave an example and he had a guy come in and run in and grab something off his desk, steal something like that, like he was robbing him halfway through, and everybody was shocked and surprised. But when you asked him to give a description of the man, nobody could really do it. They've literally just watched it happen, but their recollection of it is piss poor, because we all have our emotions at the time affect how that memory is saved down into our hard drive, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and the original storage of it is key, because if you aren't paying attention or you're not trying to remember it, then you're going to take less detail and you're only going to have your passive observations. And then when you try to recall that memory and those neurons are flying around, they're going to align slightly differently and bring back a different picture. And if you keep recalling it, it is slightly different every time. And it's a bit like Chinese whispers in your head, I guess. It just gets potentially further and further away, and you might keep some sentient points, like, I was going to say we can remember each other's date of birth. I know you can remember mine. I'm not going to say it on air, but I think I know it. Yeah, maybe. But some things like that, they're factual things.
If you divide the two numbers together, what number do you get?
3.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah. So
15th of May.
I thought it was 30th of March. That'd be 10.
Yeah.
Moving on.
So we know your maths is as good as your memory.
Math is right, but no, and it is about that perception and the filling in the gaps again. And there's another experiment that people have done which demonstrates this kind of filling in gaps, or the assumptions, or not paying attention to what you remembered but assuming later. And I think they call it the DRM test. It was obviously an acronym for something, but basically it wouldn't be put as I'm about to explain it. It'd be within the context of a whole bigger thing where people wouldn't actually know what they've been tested on. But essentially, you're given a list of words, and it could be, for example, screwdriver, drill, screw, nail, hammer, and then a bit later on, the time passes on, and then they say, "Remember that list of words? Can you just tell me, was there a saw in that list?" And people go, "Well, yeah." Because it's an associated word with a list of other things. As I say, it wouldn't have been pitched quite like that, but they've been done in such a way that you weren't obviously asking them. It'd be, a list of words, circle the ones we said earlier, whatever. But essentially, because your brain is remembering generally what was given to you, a list of tools, and you're now saying, here's a list of tools, your brain just fills the gaps, as well as a saw as the tool, though it must have been said. And it's not just that you're thinking you can remember it, it's you believe that it was there. So it's not that you doubt yourself, it's a true false memory. As far as you're concerned, it's real. But it's quite a simple test just to demonstrate how the brain can't remember everything that accurately and just fills in gaps with what it thinks should be there.
It bothers me a little bit. It makes me feel like the little bit of a revision that I did do for my exams was entirely wasted, because I probably didn't remember it entirely accurately, which could have been reflected in my exam score.
Well, maybe, but also you spent quite a bit of time with me, so so you can have a situation where false memories can be put into your heads. And they quoted a case in America. I can't remember what it was, but it was basically children who had been told that things had happened, and they came to believe that things had happened, and then they reported it, and then people got arrested for things that had happened that actually never happened. But the children, because they'd been told it did happen and it was reinforced, it got to the point where they believed it. And it's the same as you can do simple things like they quoted a TikTok meme that was going around, I can't remember what it was called, but basically it's a child that is running around in the woodland in a sort of oldish video, but you can't quite see the face. And apparently that you could go and tell your kids that was you when you were 2. We were out with Auntie such and such, and if you tell them that as they're growing up, it becomes a memory, and they don't doubt it, because why would they? But it's a complete false memory.
That's mad. Speaking of that, it's a slight detour from it, but it's a similar sort of principle where you lead your kids to believe one thing and it isn't the case. So we've got a game on
Not going back to religion, are we?
Hey?
Not going back to religion, are we?
No, we're not going back to religion. No, because we all know that we've taught my children that I'll go to a religious school and they've learned the correct way. So no, we're talking something much more important. We're talking about Mario and Luigi. Yeah, the Mario brothers. So we've got a game called Mario Party on there, and but it's basically it's a board game, and you can play. And if you've only got 2-3 players, there's another character or two that will add to it to make it up to 4. And every time Luigi gets added in, I've convinced my children utterly that Luigi is a cheat and he's cheating at the game. And the reason that they're not going to win is because he's a cheat. So now you ask my kids, they will say, Luigi's a cheat. He's cheating. We're never going to win this. He's a cheat. Despite the fact that he's just some random character doing a random thing that's basically just literally filling in the gaps of their game. Now, I thought this was hilarious, the fact that I've gotten to convince that this random character is. Except today it was sports day at the school. Okay. Yeah. And one of the lads, God bless him, young lad, before they started, you're not going to get it right every time. He started sprinting before the start of the whistle. And JJ stood up and was like, Chase, he's cheating, he's cheating. Oh.
It wasn't called Luigi, was he?
No, I hope not, for the love of God. No, he wasn't being racist as well, like some poor Italian child being abused. No, he was, I don't think he said Luigi in all honesty. But again, it could be my false memory. But no, he genuinely started accusing this child of being a cheat because I had the idea implanted into his mind that people are going to cheat at these games. Yeah. Somehow I got the blame for it. The wife was none too thrilled with the nonsense that I put into my kid's head. But hey ho.
Well, I think that's a perfectly reasonable conclusion to draw, Adam, that you put that nonsense into your children's heads.
Here's another one then, Dave. This is a famous one. Snow White. This is a film that you don't really have had to see too many times because it's very, very famous. And you've been to Disneyland. I've been to Disneyland. So we must remember what the evil stepmother says when she's looking into that mirror.
Oh, God, yes. I know what you want me to say. You want me to say, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?
Correct.
But she probably says something different, like, I can't remember. She says, mirror, mirror, tell me who is the fairest of them all.
No. Interestingly enough, it's the mirror, mirror that isn't correct. She says magic mirror on the wall, not mirror, mirror.
That doesn't really rhyme as much for a small child, does it?
A mirror, mirror on the wall.
Who's the fairest of them all?
No, she does say that bit, but she says magic mirror, not mirror, mirror. So it still rhymes, but it's utterly bizarre. But here's another one in terms of rhyming. There's also some 7 avuncular little midgets in that called the 7 dwarves. I apologize to midgets and dwarves out there. We're not going to start down that route. But yeah, so 7 dwarves. Okay. Hi ho, hi ho. Finish that.
It's off to work we go.
It isn't.
I know it isn't, otherwise you wouldn't be asking.
I know. They say a number of things that rhymes with hi ho, hi ho. One of which is it's home from work we go. But everybody remembers hi ho, hi. And I don't know where that comes from. But how bizarre is that? Because I think if you were to take a poll, if you were to say our survey said, and ask people to say, they'd get a big, because that isn't the case.
And the thing is, it's the complete opposite as well. One saying you're going to work and one saying you're coming home from work.
I know, and that's it. It's like it's off to work we go. I can't help but feel that's some corporate thing to make. It's like, get to bloody work, you lazy bastards. Never mind. Fighting the revolution against the government.
Careful, we're not doing politics.
We're not, no, but we have said, and here, just as a slight detour, for any folks joining in and listeners, we actually have said that we would, and I'm going to see if Dave's still up for this now, before like Rishi called a snap election in July, we actually said we were going to do a live stream throughout the night for the election. Is that still on the cards?
The whole night, or just as long as it takes to realise that the Conservatives have been totally and utterly kicked and they're not going to be in power.
Wow, interesting. Do you believe that? Because actually Gaz is less convinced that's going to be the case. He thinks that they're going to sneak it.
What, as in a majority, or be able to do a
no.
coalition?
personally, I believe they're going to get absolutely smashed, and I think people want to send a message to them. And I think it's really I'm going a slight detour here again. But I said this last week in terms of there's a pretty good chance that Labour are going to be in power come start of August. Okay, and I think it's really, really important that if we do absolutely smash the Conservatives and send a message to them, that Labour understand that if they balls things up like they're prone to do in the past, well, guess what? You got 4 to 5 years, and that's it. We'll vote you out again, and we'll put somebody else in. And I think they need to know that the electorate need to take back the power and not just vote the way that they've always voted just because. I was looking at some of the odds actually. So where we live in the Congleton borough or Congleton constituency, okay, and it has been a Tory stronghold for literally, I think, probably all our lives. I can't remember anything other than as Conservative MP in our area. But I was looking at the odds on a well-known bookmakers the other day, and the odds that they were offering. I shan't mention them because they do employ me. But the odds that they were offering was basically they were saying Labour are favourites to get in. It's only a very slight favourite, but they are odds on to get in. The odds on Fiona Bruce, who's our MP, getting back in, are odds against. Only slightly though. And now again, I think that would surprise me because this is one area where there's a lot of Gazes and a lot of Daves who I would say would probably have voted Conservative and voted him in despite that Brexit nonsense.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, and I can't see how they can win. But I don't think the Labour Party can win either as an outright majority. So it's probably going to end up as some terrible Labour, SNP, Lib Dem pact, which will just be an absolute car crash for the country. Well, but this on the topic of this, though, I mean, Christ, false memories. If you could actually go around and speak to people now, and I reckon you could get stacks of evidence of false memories where people believe that a member of the Conservative Party absolutely did that, and it probably isn't even a wrong memory, which is different, as in, somebody's told you something, you've remembered it correctly, and it's wrong. That's different. But you actually genuinely believe something that happened, or somebody said something that happened, and you believe it, because this politics is so divisive and gets people so wound up. I reckon there's absolutely stacks of evidence of people believing stuff that just never happened.
You're probably right, to be honest with you. I think if you were to name any kind of utter shithousery, then the Tories will be responsible for it somewhere along the way. You just pick a man, and they probably did do it. But no, I take it back. Actually, we are circling back towards the Mandela effect here, and you mentioned it earlier, touched on it earlier, in terms of the original lady who came up with the concept of it, then circling back and changing her mind. But it's a conspiracy theory, and I do think this is another one actually. Okay. This is one, and you mentioned it earlier. So just out of interest, where were you when JFK was shot?
Was he even born? Was it in the 60s?
It was. I just wanted to test. Yeah, it was 1963, November 22nd, November the 22nd, yeah, of 1963. So there's a very, very famous film made by Oliver Stone called JFK. Okay. And one of the things he alleges in that film, okay, is that Lee Harvey Oswald is a bad shot. He's a terrible shot. There's no way he could have taken that shot from on top of the bookstore. He could not have, he could not have hit JFK in the way that he had, because he had a terrible shot. And the amount of people I've heard who have discussed the idea that there was a second gunman on the grassy knoll, and I'm not disputing whether there was or there wasn't, but the amount of people that will say he was a terrible shot, he couldn't have done it, there must have been a second gunman. That comes from the film alone. Actually, if you go online, you can actually view his records. Not only was he a good shot, he was an exceptional shot. He was a sharpshooter. He was a sniper. That's what he was paid to do. But yet people will tell you he is, and people will believe that. So conspiracy theories, I suspect, also have their birth. They grow from those seeds that are planted in the grounds of the Mandela effect.
Yeah, absolutely they will. Because people, again, they want to believe something, and it gets to the point where that is 100% the truth, no matter what. And even if it didn't start out that way, it can just build and feed, and those neurons flying around change to adapt becomes an echo chamber, reinforces it, and it just gets stronger and stronger. I mean, you've only got to look in America at the moment for the Donald Trump and all the shenanigans that goes on there, and the way he keeps saying the same stuff over and over and over again, and people just then repeat it and they believe it's true, and it's just absolute nonsense.
It's a disgrace. It's the greatest disgrace I've ever seen. But here's the thing. I'll tell you what I think about American politics, okay? And a risk of offending a lot of our friends out there, because a lot of our friends and my cousin and a few other people probably a little bit more tolerant of Trump than perhaps we are. I'm not going to say who they vote for. I don't know who they vote for. It's none of my business. But certainly Donald Trump in America is not as unpopular as you would think that he would be. And there's, you know, if you were to look on certain bookmaker sites, favorite to win that election. But I think that what America needs to do, America needs to step away from Donald Trump and step away from Biden. I think they need to move on for that. They need to draw a line under that, because I think regardless of what Trump did for their economy, and I'm not doubting that he had a lot of benefits in terms of what he did, but in terms of the division in the country right now, he is entirely responsible for a lot of it. Biden don't help, and the nonsense that he's pulled with parts of the Clinton family and obviously, of course, the previous fellow Barack Obama. There's a few question marks to be asked over there, and just whether he's even capable of running the bloody country. God bless him, because nobody believes that. But I think America needs to put that behind them. They need two new candidates for this election. I'm amazed and a little bit disappointed that they've gone with those two, because I think they need to get a little bit. It's the United States. They need that unity back. I listened to the Tiddy and China podcast, and they're utterly convinced that civil wars is a common in the States. I'm not saying I believe it, but I know there's enough people there that do, and if there's enough people that do believe it, then there's a danger that it could happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, the riots at Capitol Hill was just a prequel to what could happen. I mean, if Trump loses and he starts that same rhetoric again, just imagine having gone through all of these court cases where he's consistently said that the jury's rigged, the judge is rigged, even though he was found guilty very quickly by a jury of independents, where it had, as far as humanly possible, weeding out anybody that might have any bias. He was still found guilty, and he still says it's a witch hunt and it's all rigged. So if you carry that all the way through, then have a election which he loses, it could be carnage, because the thing is so divided. I mean, I always thought that is it Kamala Harris, that Biden's?
Yeah.
I always thought that he would stand up long enough to take all of the sort of abuse from Trump and his side, and then very late on drop out, and Kamala Harris to step in, so she's shielded from months and months and months of abuse, but actually becomes a much more tolerable candidate right towards the end.
No, I agree, and to be honest with you, I'm amazed that Harris isn't president now. I thought at some point, I mean, it's pretty clear that the guys, and I'm not being mean when I say this, there's clear signs of dementia there with him. That he, I don't believe he's capable to do, to hold the position that he holds. And I fully expected that they would say that, and they would have Harris in place, and that was the long-term plan. Why it's not panned out that way, I don't know. And I know what you're saying about Trump, and I think it is I genuinely think it is a little bit of a concern as to what he could cause and what he could create. And I'm absolutely amazed that America haven't stepped away from that and tried to bring some unity back. Yes, the candidates are always going to slag each other off. But here's my two questions about this Donald Trump case, okay? So if he paid a hush money, I'll be asking for it back, because he's not been very quiet about it, you know what I mean, taking it to bloody court. And second of all, what was he paying a hush money for in the first place? I would say the average Trump voter, if Donald Trump stood up there and said, yeah, I fucked a porn star, they'd say, I just think it's a very bizarre story how it's all unfolded.
Yeah, but the paying off somebody isn't the illegal bit, is it? That's not the case. It's the fact that he hid that in his accounts. He paid her off to stop it being a news story, and then hid that he'd done that, and that's the offence. As you say, nobody for a moment thinks that he didn't do it, because the things he says and the things he's done are just, right on the money for that sort of thing. So I don't think that's in doubt. And you're quite right that most of his supporters would be proud of him for doing it.
But here's the thing, though. So we're taking it back to the Mandela effect. this period of history that we're remembering now, okay. So you're going to be you think about what's gone on in the United States and the danger that they're heading towards that civil war that they believe they potentially could be. And we look in the UK, and there's division here as well, because that started a little bit, probably maybe around about the same sort of time with Brexit. That started a lot of division. The likes of Farage, the likes of Johnson, the likes of who's the fella who drove to Wales to test his eyes. You know what I mean?
Cummings.
Cummings, that's it. Yeah, Cummings and Goings. How will these how will these people be remembered? How the Mandela effect? When we think back on this period of time, will we think of it as, will we almost like sneer at it in terms of how people have conducted themselves? And will we forget actually the hardships that we've had on the back of these people who, when you think that, I think we said this last week in terms of people couldn't go mourn their dead at the funerals, but these guys are having a piss up and having cheese and wine and really laughing at us. Will we remember them for the people that they are, or will you look back on Boris Johnson as that avuncular character who used to appear on Have I Got News for You and make jokes and bumble his way through interviews and be mildly entertaining?
I think there'll be a large number of people that remember them as doing their job as civil servants, as in serving the public, as opposed to the office of civil servant as MPs, in very, very difficult and stressful conditions and making very difficult decisions. And a lot of decisions were right and made a big positive impact in times that were very difficult. And the fact that they seem to have a disregard for the difficulties and the struggles that they were putting on everybody else is going to be remembered. But at the end of the day, there's an awful lot of people out there that were doing just the same and ignoring it 100%. So it's not like they were doing something that a huge number of people weren't, but a lot of decent, honest folk were doing the absolute right thing and suffering as a response of that. And they were a bit slacker than they should have been. But I think to diminish everything that they did as a government and a civil service as a whole in those times based on isolated incidents, no matter how bad taste they were, I don't think that's how everybody's going to remember.
I know, so I'll remember
it. Anyway, I've got another test. Moving on from politics, getting off politics. Another experiment, and it comes back to your conflagration of memories. And they tested this with bees. Okay, bees. Okay, so this is how the test went. And so what they were trying to prove with this test is that it's not just humans that store memories in a certain way in terms of your short term, your long term, and the meta stuff that pieces it all together, but animals, or in this case insects, do as well. So they trained the bees, which apparently is quite straightforward to do. You get a artificial flower. It's a bright yellow flower. You put some nectar on it, and you send the bees out, and they find the flower. They get the nectar, and they go backward and forward, and getting it. And then you put another flower, and this time it's like a archery target, black and yellow circles. And you put the honey on the nectar on that one, and they go backward and forward and get it. And then they keep doing that because they remember that's the last one they went to. And then you put a third flower, which is actually a yellow sort of outer circle with a black center circle, so sort of combination of the two. And you let the bees out again. And to start with, they go to the one that they last saw the nectar. But if you keep the bees away for a day and let them out, some of them then start to go to the one which is a blend of the two, because they can't remember. They don't have that immediate short-term memory to remember. So they conflagrate, or they use the meta information to piece together what they knew before. And then the longer the number of days go, the more bees actually went to the merged pattern, the merged flower, because they couldn't remember the actual one they went to.
Wow. I mean, to be fair, they are bees. You know what I mean? My anticipation of a bee is his memory ain't that great in the first place.
But they have memory, and they have short term and long term, and they piece things together if they can't If you can't remember it in the short term, they piece it together with what they do have and come to this sort of middle ground. They're just proving that it happens in a way that goes beyond humans.
So it's not just us. So in terms of, like, let's say something like a dog, our dogs, if you've ever owned a dog out there, I grew up with dogs. They have a memory of you, and they, certain dogs remember certain words. I've had dogs in the past that couldn't probably recognize me, whereas I've had dogs which were very big. Ben, who had a Springer Spaniel, bless him, had an incredible memory for stuff that you'd say words, and he could recall, and he would go and do the different acts, or that sounds dodgy. You go and perform different tasks based on that, and even just phrases like Christmas presents. You can tell him, but go stand by his Christmas. You go, well, where's your Christmas present? You go and stand by his Christmas presents at Christmas. You use the phrase Christmas presents, in the middle of the year. It looked like you were mental. That sounds a bit Partridge-like, but yeah. But he was really smart. So it's interesting with dogs. But do you know what the best kind of bees are? Best kind of bees.
The best kind of bees. Go on.
Boobies.
Jesus Christ.
I apologize. That's where we are, folks. That's where we are. But no, I take on board what you're saying about, like, I mean, ultimately, and this is something that we need to address. When you think about human beings, we have an idea. Again, it's about perception. We have an idea about ourselves. We have an idea about ourselves in the place of the world that we're being the primary being on there. We are the dominant primate. We are part of the great ape family, but we are far superior to them. But ultimately, we aren't that dissimilar to them. And if bees that not suffer, but have the same condition and memory as we are, actually we aren't significantly different, are we? Or are we?
Well, I like honey, but I suppose bees make honey. They don't like honey, do they? They like nectar. Quite like bees, actually. No, there's an awful lot of similarities, isn't there? Everyone's just trying to survive, whether a bee or a human. You've got memories of what's going on, and I guess relative to your brain size and capacity, your memories work in different ways.
Well, I've got a question for you now.
Okay, go on.
No, it's about cows.
Cows.
So cows. If cows have that sentient level of memory, and that maybe that they can remember stuff, and they'll remember their young, does that make you feel a little bit worse about eating them?
No.
Why?
Well, because I'm a meat eater, and as long as animal welfare standards are where they should be, and there's no suffering. And I know that you could argue that the fact that the cow's been bred and then killed is suffering, but within a tolerance of that, then I'm okay with that.
I know what you're saying, but if we're establishing the fact that in terms of beings, we're not significantly different, our experiences and the way that bees, it's just something as simple as, no disrespect to bees, there's only bees out there listening, but if it's something as simple as a bee and how that conducts itself isn't too dissimilar from the way our memory functions, should we not be too concerned that maybe we're misinterpreting, or we're led to believe that when a cow is led off into the slaughterhouse and it sees its mate stood there in front of it, that it gladly goes that way, that it doesn't know what's going to happen to it, that it isn't there mourning for its young or being mourned for it by its lost friends that are left out there in the pasture to be green, knowing damn well that they're probably going to go missing one day and turn up somewhere on somebody's plate as some delicious hamburger. But that's not the point, is it, to be honest with you? How would we feel if we were put in that situation? And is their experience that different from ours?
My God, that's a bit deep, Adam. And I don't have...
The beer I'm drinking is 15.5%, and that might have an effect on the way my thoughts are going.
If I'd have known that was going to be a topic, I'd have listened to more podcasts on the way home, because I don't know. I don't know the depth of a cow's understanding of its awareness of its environment and the consequences and the actions and things that are about to go on. Sorry, you've been a vegetarian for a long time. Did you ever research that, look into that?
I didn't need to. That's a lot of the reason why I did. These are beautiful creatures that didn't deserve to die. I can survive perfectly well, and I did for 15 years. I apologize because I've had cow for my dinner tonight. But I survived perfectly well just eating plants for 15 years. Never did me any harm. I can survive and do it now. And we all could do it now if we chose to. But that's not the message that we're leaving this podcast with. Ultimately, so let's think about something that's more important than that. Then Star Trek, Dave. You used to watch Star Trek, did you? And I know your brother's a big Trekkie. God bless him. And we're going to have him on the podcast in a few weeks' time. But so, how many times then? James Tiberius Kirk, yeah, played by William Shatner. How many times in the however many episodes that they made of that TV series did he say that utterly famous phrase that everybody quotes? Beam me up, Scotty.
Let's say never.
Never. He never once said that. How utterly bizarre is that? The closest he ever came to saying it was, Scotty, beam us up. He never once said, beam me up, Scotty. So where the hell does that come from? Probably parodies, because it's something that's been very heavily parodied, isn't it?
I guess so, but I don't know. I mean, was the origins of it the actual program makers itself? Did somebody missay it and they thought, oh, that sounds quite cool, and it just sort of rippled from there?
Who knows? It could have been used on an advert. You know, and when you think about certainly American television, which that was, there's a proliferation of promotion of those sort of types of television programming amongst sport programming and amongst many other things. Maybe that's something that they shot for that, of him getting beamed up, and everyone's like, wow, imagine the concept of that actually happening. And then that's used for that, and that's how it gets remembered, because it's short and sharp, and you're watching it again, it's implanted in your memory, and it's catchy. It's a catchy phrase.
And it's not even a wrong memory that somebody's told you something you believe, because you yourself have watched the programs countless times. You've had the evidence put right in front of you, yet you still, if we'd have not had this conversation, if we were just, this wasn't the topic and we were just down the pub, and you'd have said, you never said that, I'd have sworn blind that he did in every episode, and I'd have been absolutely convinced that I was right. And it's just bizarre, because it's clearly not. And I've watched the program many times and never actually heard, if what you're saying is correct, never actually heard it be said. Yet I'd still be absolutely convinced.
And the other thing is as well, Dave, there's people out there listening to this podcast right now. There's people out there who've looked at our social media who will remember us categorically saying we were going to do a live episode when the election happened. Can you imagine those folks being wrong?
No, I remember saying that. I remember you saying it. It might have been me. Did I actually suggest it?
Yeah, you suggested it.
Yeah, I did. But
that's my memory anyway.
But did I actually mean I spend all night doing the bloody thing?
No,
did I just mean a normal 1 hour slot on the night?
Well, maybe we'll do that. Well, maybe we'll do a bonus episode and we'll do that. I'd like to do some coverage of live events. We can stick the TV on in the foreground. We can commentate on what we're seeing. We obviously can't share that due to copyright issues, and I'm not getting done again for that. I get fucking fed up of YouTube sending me stinking emails. And I've only done it about 3 or 4 times. But it's annoying. So I would like to do that. I would like to do that. So we are coming up to round about the hour mark. We've talked about the Mandela effect for most of the episode. We got a little bit distracted along the way, but that's just the way it goes.
Before we move on, can I pick up on one last interesting thing I wrote down about the actual subject?
Of course, yeah.
Because this is something that people sometimes say to me when I genuinely can't remember hardly anything from any time, particularly growing up as a child. We had a couple of school friends on a few episodes ago, Rob and Peaky, and I'm told that I hung around a load with them at school. I don't have any memories of that. And then we actually went out and spent the evening with them, drinking some beers and just have a real good chat and catch up. And at the end of that, I got home and I still could not find a single memory in my head of those two guys at school.
Are you serious?
I'm absolutely serious. I just could not. And I was talking to Catherine about it, the wife, and she said, did something happen? It's like traumas. It's like a repressed memories that you're just like, you don't want to open up to these things, and you bury these memories deep inside you. And I said, no, I just can't remember. I can't remember bad stuff. I just can't remember it. And on this podcast I was listening to, they touched on repressed memories, and the guy said that the psychiatrist said, psychologist, sorry, basically said that in almost every case, it's very, very rare that actually repressed memories exist. It became a big thing in the 60s and became a boom industry where psychiatrists could actually talk to people to uncover these memories. And actually, there was a lot of suggestive talking going on that actually implanted and created false memories that then people then revealed as an actual memory, which made them feel better and get on with their life. So they actually invented false memories, which made them feel better and had a good outcome. But actually, the current thinking is it's just not true. They don't exist. They're not there. It's not something that's buried, waiting to be uncovered.
So now, in terms of Peaky, okay, Peaky did entirely different A levels to you and I. So we only saw him largely at lunch and break times, and the exception to that is Rob. Okay, but here's the thing about the amount of time that you spent with Rob. Yeah, you did politics A level. Do you remember doing that?
I do remember doing that. I remember I did it. I know that's the same thing.
No, we were there. So was Rob, just for the record. He was in every politics lesson that we were ever in. And what was the other one he did? Economics, was it? Yeah, exactly. I did economics as well. Rob was there, sat next to you, every single lesson, okay? Now, here's the thing. Sat next to you, yeah. I sat the other side of you, just for the record. So, just in case you don't remember that and you started to wonder who the fuck I am. Yeah.
I don't remember that at all, no.
Yeah, okay. Then every single free that you had, okay. Now, you didn't spend them all with Rob because Rob did 3 A levels. Some people, the Mandela effect, will think we were asked to leave mathematics A level. Some people remember it as we chose to leave. You know what I mean? There's a conflagration there.
We still did 3 A levels.
Oh, we did general studies. Now, I will say this. I don't believe Rob was with me on that one, but then neither were you. You probably won't remember that. You're going to have to take my word for it. But yeah, because they were done in 4 groups, if I remember correctly, because everybody did general studies. But literally half of your frees you spent with Rob and me.
Not a single memory.
For 2 years. For 2 whole years. And you don't remember a little bit of it.
Not a thing. I can't even remember this corridor you talk about quite often. I can remember the common room, but only because I've seen photos. I've got photos of people in the common room. But I nothing.
We very rarely went in the common room. I did from time to time. You did from time to time, but we rarely went in the common room. We went and stood in the corridor outside because we were too cool for we were too cool for the common room. We were the corridor boys, the back alley boys, I think they used to call. They didn't. But
okay, I'm going back to repressed memories. Probably are true.
This might be why you repressed it. No, in all seriousness, dude, you spent an awful lot of time with Rob. I spent an awful lot of time with Rob. I can't believe you can't. Rob, if you listen to this, I apologize. Don't be offended. It's Dave. It's not you. But yeah, it's. I find that mad. But how great was it? And I said this to my wife when we got back. Like, and I had a few beers and had a few cocktails afterwards, and it was a cracking night. But yeah, and this is the wonderful thing about this podcast. When we do, we catch up with people, and it's great when we catch up with the likes of Vic Ferrari and we make new friends, and and Benjamin in Florida, we make new friends. It's fantastic. How great is it though that like 25, 30 years since we ever sat down, not that you'll remember it, together, we actually got to sit down and have a beer with those 2 guys on that Friday night, and we chatted not like we're not been apart, because we talked about a lot of the stuff in between, filled in a few blanks for those guys and they filled in a few blanks for us. But that was great, wasn't it? Wasn't that a great evening?
It was really good. And you say 25. I think you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe I probably saw them since I left school at 18, which is
probably
going to be 32 years ago. I mean, I could well have bumped into them. I don't know. I don't know if they went straight off to university, then I may well have not seen them since then. So over 30 years. But yeah, even though I don't remember them at all, as in I don't remember events or things that happened with them, I remembered them. I recognized them and I remembered them and I felt like I knew them. but I still had no memories of actual things. It's weird. Memory's a weird thing.
It's utterly bizarre. It's utterly bizarre. So, I mean, you remember the anarcho-pacifism. You know, you remember the fact that I was the anarcho-pacifist candidate in an election that was live covered by our podcast, I believe, and we made a video for that. Excuse me, and Rob was the guy who filmed it, the first half of the video. And you don't remember any of that, do you? You don't remember Rob being there filming the video. Peaky was there. You did a little bit of the voiceover for it. You know, they were all part of that political campaign that we were a part of.
I can remember filming you. I can remember you wearing a hat because you kept trying to read it and your eyes were looking down, and the solution to not looking down was to wear a hat that covered your eyes. I think you sang Magic Moments, maybe.
Magic Moments by Perry Como.
And I kind of remember the video all being kind of green because just the quality of recording device wasn't particularly great.
It's good.
But these things, you see, I say I remember them, but they're just things that between us, when we've met up over, infrequently over the last 30 years, because it's a very small number of things I can, inverted commas, remember, they get mentioned. So it's kind of, it's repetition every few years for 30 years that I think I remember them, but I'm just saying what I think I remember as opposed to actually remembering them. But then again, is that just what memories are anyway?
Possibly. And we'll have to watch the video to confirm. But just for Gaz's reference, I was wearing a Chicago Bears hat as well that day, not a Steelers one.
Have you actually got the video?
Yeah, I've got the video. I've got it in my garage. I've got that and the Sabotage films. They are out there.
You should get them transcribed. That's words. You should get them moved over to digital format.
I think I've only got 3. I've only got Sabotage 3. Bill, I believe, has Sabotage 1 and 2. Those are the ones probably.
I think I had one in my mother's loft.
You need to
still be there.
We need to get that put on DVD. I will not put it on YouTube because your prosecutions will follow. Some of the things we said were deeply, deeply inappropriate. But we do need to get that put on DVD for someone's birthday or something like that, so they can be shared about, because they were very, very entertaining. However, we are somehow beyond the hour mark now, so we do need to call it a day. Dude, sum it up for us. I'm asking you to sum up memory, which is in itself a big mistake.
When you said we were going to have talk about the Mandela effect, which I knew absolutely nothing about, my original thought was, well, normally if Gaz is on the podcast, you've done some research, Gaz talks a lot, it doesn't really matter, I can just sit here and say, no, I don't really know about that, and have fun listening to it. But because I had to do the research, I actually found it really fascinating, because I am interested in memory, and my memory is very peculiar in that it's so segmented in the way it remembers things. It remembers some things really well, but they're things that I think are important, and it dismisses everything else almost entirely. It's a fascinating subject, and I think we should probably try to get on an expert at some point who actually knows to the best of knowledge what memory is and how it works, because I think I could talk to him for quite some time. But I've really enjoyed it, and yes, you're right to cut it short, because I know Gaz always says it's like being down the pub with your mates and just chatting, but there was a danger that we'd still be doing it in an hour's time talking of stuff which is of no interest to our listeners.
Well, no, you say that. One of the things we got the message, so oh god, I'm going down that route again. So I got a message from Lee from the Boo Brothers. So when we did the episode with Pete and he had his microphone problems, let's gloss over those, and we were sat outside, and it got to the point where it was largely me, you, and Gaz chatting. He messaged and he said he loves to listen to podcasts that just mates chatting. So maybe that's something that we'll explore in the future, on the off chance that we get all 3 of us together on the same podcast. But that is indeed for another day. But yes, we will get a memory on. Oh, fuck's sake. We will get an expert. This beer is very strong. We'll get an expert on to talk about memory at some point in the future. But for next week, well, I tell you what, we'll be talking about something entirely different again. So take care, and we'll catch you next week.